Postmodernism is basically started by Jacques Derrida and Richard Rorty and some other philosophers who decided that there's no such thing as truth objectively at all. There's no objective truth. There's no objectivity to morals and ethics at all. So we were cut back to the idea that everything is subjective. Everything is basically a preference over another. There really is no truth out there, as Rorty says. To combat that, I would suggest that people begin reading some good books on the subject. There's a couple books by Phil Sanders on that subject that have to do with the church. There's one that's written by a well-known theologian out in the West, but the best book, I think, philosophically on that subject is called Truth Decay, written by Doug Groites in Denver Theological Seminary. He's a philosopher, and it's more philosophically reasoned and very carefully reasoned and very, very well done. It will help people understand what postmodernism is and how to wade through it. I'll tell you where we started with Warren Center, and you're with Daily Apologist, and so you're somewhat in the same vein. You're doing podcasts and some things like that. We're not doing. We have published, though, some books by David Roper on apologetics for children from 4 years old on up. There's 2 books so far. Zoe likes to ask questions. One's on the existence of God, the other's on the inspiration and authority of the Scriptures. There'll be another one coming out on the deity of Christ. Those are the main 3 things that we focus on in the Warren Center. But we wanted to start early. We want to be able to start with the generation. We do not have apologetics courses or subject matter in our churches. That is, to me, a travesty. Our generation of kids are going off and being taught by postmodernists in institutions of higher learning, and they learn to become atheists or agnostics at best because they're influenced by the professors. Peter Bagassian, his philosophy professor at Portland State University, teaches classes in atheism subsidized by tax dollars because it's a state school, but he teaches that to impressionable young people who are going out as atheists because of the influence he has over them. We've got to be able to counteract that, and we can't do that in just a small amount of things. We need to be involved in a lot of things. Teaching the next generation's paramount. Teaching the ones that we have in our older generation, like ourselves, myself, and others who have never bought into this, that's paramount. We've just got a lot of work to do. A.J. Ayer and the logical positivists came around in the 1920s, and they said that for anything to be a meaningful statement, like God is, or God is noble, or God is good, or God is omnipotent, it had to be either true by definition or empirically verifiable. That took the philosophical world by storm for a short time until some philosophers began to say, hey, wait a minute. The verifiability principle is neither true by definition nor empirically verifiable. And so it fell its own weight. It fell dead from the press. That happened in about a short span of about 30, 40 years. Well, it was influential until that time. But following upon that was God talk. How can you make sense out of talking about God, since God is not a matter of empirical investigation? He's a metaphysical entity. How can you even talk about that intelligibly and make sense? That went on for a while. Then we got into some new stuff. We call it postmodernism. It's postmodernist philosophy turned to the subjective side, the feeling side, because we cut ourselves loose from any objectivity, any absolutes. That will fall of its own weight too, much like the verifiability principle died dead-born, stillborn. It will take a little longer because it's more influential. It's in academia now, and it's being widely felt in all the universities, the higher educational establishments. So it's more influential than logical positivism ever was. But it will die of its own weight too when people begin to get some sensibility to them and understand that you can't really deny truth without affirming it is absolute.